Retro Recluse Radio, and I'm here with a friend named Cullan. Say hello, Cullan.
Hello.
Today we're gonna talk about a couple of different things, but of course, by our name, we're gonna talk about retro stuff. And to say retro for Star Wars, I think is kind of like really obvious. But we wanted to talk about like the new stuff compared to the old stuff, like just our thoughts on it. Uh, yeah. You want to start with what you think? What do you think of like the new stuff, the new Last Jedi
Um,
movie and Force
I, f-
Awakens?
I feel like all the new recent movies have kind of taken focus away from main story points and character development. Instead, gone for like bigger battles, more flashy, kind of appealing
Yeah, just like
everyone type
more
content.
action instead of there being actual story or like a fairy tale. Because like George Lucas, the director, like when he made New Hope, he was really wanting to focus on the fairy tale because during that time, I think it was either it was after Vietnam or like during Vietnam. I forgot, but I think it was a really depressing time then. And
Oh
what
yeah.
he usually does with his other films, he makes like art films or documentary films. That's what he specialized in before he made Star Wars.
Hmm.
And he wanted to make a really positive movie, just something for families to watch and have fun with. So he made Star Wars, the fairy tale. But now I think instead of it being less like just a fairy tale story that's known by all and is like a like Snow White. Everyone mostly knows it, but and it's positive, but it doesn't have a bunch of merchandise with it. Like sure there'll be maybe a T-shirt, or a little figurine or something, maybe, but other than that, there's not enough for it to be an entire like franchise. But with Star Wars, it kind of rocketed. They made action figures and all that stuff, and that is definitely retro, like collectible Star Wars figures. But now it's kind of less about the story anymore. It's
Hmm.
more about the Flash, like you were saying. Yeah.
Yeah, it is really upsetting, but for just about everything that's being remade now is has moved on from trying to tell a story or trying to show like struggles of characters into more just like I said before, just flashy bits of action and lasers and everything.
Yeah.
But
Especially
of
with the new
course,
trailer where Rey is literally jumping over a TIE fighter, and then there's like a shot of Kylo Ren putting down a trooper. Literally just with his
mhm.
hand, he's just pushing him, and then he just pushes him to the ground. I just imagine he just became like a high school bully, right? He just walks up and he just pushes him down and asks for his lunch money.
Oh yeah, no, he he didn't have that good of an upbringing. No,
No,
I
he
would
like
imagine.
I feel like though out of the Force Awakens movie, he's probably the best character. It's not like he's a really good character, but he's definitely the best one because now he has somewhat of a backstory. Because
Hmm.
instead of Rey, where it's like, where literally they stated, oh, spoilers, I guess, if you haven't seen Force Awakens or Last Jedi, which is kind of unlikely, but whatever. We have to put that in anyway, probably. But uh, at towards the end, Rey is told by Kylo, and this is to believe to be the truth, where Rey came from people that sold her for drunk, like just for drinking money. But
Hmm.
and that leaves us with nothing to go on with. She just is a random girl that now has the force powers to take on Kylo, and from the new trailer, apparently Sidious, which we might get into that later, how that works out. But at least with Kylo, it's like that is the descendant of Leia, which had the Force, and then she was trained by Luke, or not she. Leia was. I don't even know if Leia was trained by Luke. That would be interesting. But Kylo was trained by Luke, and then
That would be pretty
afterwards,
interesting.
yeah, that would be. But yeah, Kylo was trained by Luke, to be a Jedi, and then he betrayed them and joined the dark side. At least there is something of a backstory. But with Rey, it's like, oh, you were sold. You just have force powers. That's it. We're moving on.
Wow. So you were sold, then you became a scavenger, and then boom, you are the chosen one. Okay, cool.
Yeah, it's kind of lopsided, really, how that works.
Yeah.
What about the? What do you think of like the old movies? And
The
if you
old
want to, we can talk about the prequels, which I, I personally don't want to get into completely because, oh boy, there's already a bunch of media for that. But go ahead.
I really actually haven't seen all of the prequels yet. I've only seen, I think, parts of episode 3. So,
Like the
I mean,
Revenge of the Sith.
yeah, only part of it too. So, I I can't talk about them either.
Okay, you gotta answer me this though. Was that one scene that you watched the one where Anakin kills all the little younglings?
Yeah, you know what? I think you're dead on the money.
Honestly, like out of all the scenes in that movie, that one has to be like the darkest one in the entire like Star Wars franchise, right? But it's still
Uh,
freaking hilarious. I don't get it. It's
I
really
don't.
funny to people because of just how dark it was and just how it was also stated. But okay, like you've only seen like parts of 3, right?
Yeah.
But you do know like those are regarded as not good movies.
Yeah. Or at least I thought they were just like mediocre-ish.
Do you kind of like know why?
Not quite actually. No.
Well, the first one, Padawan Menace, it was because the story was really boring, and this kind of follows through with the second one. Whatever the reason was, he wanted to make, or George Lucas wanted to make it like really political, and not
Hmm.
in the sense where it would be talking about our politics in the real world. It was just the made up politics in the Star Wars universe, which I think would be
Mm.
even worse.
I can imagine trying to follow the politics of a fictional world to be very hard.
Yeah. Anyway, let's move on to our next topic, which is retro bling. This stuff, I kind of had to get a definition for it, really, but you know when you see those like little trinkets or clothing that's supposed to be about a franchise, or maybe it's like a little retro type thing, but it's not actually retro. Like they're like walking around with like the new 3DS that looks like the NES or a Game Boy. It's not
Hmm.
really retro. It's like you're not walking around with the actual Game Boy, but you're working around with like something that looks like it.
And also with the isn't there like the original PlayStation Mini too?
Oh yeah, they did release that along with the NES.
Hmm. I think if you really want like a classic experience, you should just like go on eBay or something and buy the original console instead of just buying like a small knockoff version.
Yeah,
I
I
think
feel
it's more fun.
yeah, definitely because having the true thing is probably better than just getting something that looks the same resemblance, you know?
You get you get the right feel for it and everything.
Yeah. And then also you're enjoying how it was back then because the whole point of it being retro and the whole point of getting stuff that maybe from the past was to experience the past, right?
Yeah,
So trying to get something that isn't actually it just simply looks like it and it reminds you of it. Of course, that isn't the same as actually having it. Like my
yeah,
dad actually has the NES, and
and
he has the Legend of Zelda for. I think he has the first one actually for it, and then we
uh,
have a Game Boy somewhere. We have an old DS. It's just having retro stuff is cool. Like viewers, if you have seen the collections of like NES and SNES games or stuff from the Nintendo consoles, like from before the Wii, I would say. And then like all the PlayStation games, the original ones, I mean, and then all the like Atari games. The reason why they collect those is so that that we can preserve the past. So like, Colin, would you say like the new stuff? Like, what do you think people like have running through their minds when they buy stuff like that, like the new retro bling?
You mean like the PlayStation Mini and all that
Yeah,
other type of
yeah,
stuff? I feel like they are kind of like half and half between wanting to like experience the past and having to deal with the stuff that came with it. Like they don't want to bother with like the yellow wire and the white wire and where they connect behind the TV or setting up the console itself. They don't really want to deal with that. They just kind of want to experience the 80s and experience it now, or experience the 90s and
they want
experience it
a
now.
convenient way.
Hmm.
Yeah. Would you say like people get it just so that they can show off to friends? Like I might be like the entire point of this podcast might be kind of part of it is that the Retro Recluse, meaning we just like retro stuff, even though we might not have been born in that era. I
Oh
was
yeah.
born in 2003, meaning I might have gotten stuff from the 90s, but definitely not the 80s. But we still talk about that stuff today. There are still people that make kind of like little videos online or listen to music from the 80s in not to like the extent of like just listening to it because it's good, but because it's from the past, from like a time where we thought we were in a golden age, basically.
Hmm.
I'm not saying it's a golden age because there were definitely problems, but
Oh
where
yeah.
in America we thought it was a golden age. You can kind of
Yeah.
like I would say what would be another decade like 60s, I would say, or
60s would be another one. Yeah, like the classic happy family
the
American.
suburban family, yeah.
Hmm.
White picket
Like
fences.
all the different stuff that came with it, like the little appliances and furniture, and like
Yeah.
the war propaganda posters and everything.
Yeah. There's an aesthetic for that.
Hmm.
And speaking of old 80s music, we wanted to talk about this genre that's not necessarily new. Because technically, what it is, vaporwave is what we're talking about. What it basically is that people take old clips of like commercials or store jingles or sounds from like the 80s. They'd be like VHS kind of stuff. Like if you viewers have like or listeners actually have ever like seen a video where it has like a grain to it or it just kind of sounds a little echoey maybe. I don't know how to describe it, but it's kind of interesting because we're making music that's supposed to resemble uh, older types of machinery and getting the feel of like there's this one song that I listened to where they took like little sound clips from like a Coca-Cola commercial and put it in and made it into a song. Colin, have you ever listened to vaporwave before? Have
Oh yeah,
some
yeah.
examples?
I don't know too many specific examples because usually I'd just be skimming through music and I'd listen to it and kind of move on. But I have definitely listened to a lot of vaporwave and really did enjoy it. There are actually like different subgenres to it too, or maybe it's just its own genre. But there's also like synthwave and retro wave and other types of different, I guess, wave music too that almost are pretty similar to vaporwave as well.
Yeah. And speaking of retrowave, the animation, if you are watching this, is called retrowave, and I will of course have in the like the bottom left the person who made the animation. Thanks to them for making this, but yeah, they also played the video to the Stranger Things, which that's kind of a that's I would what would you think Stranger Things like in a category would be? Would it be something that's supposed to that's like supposed to be set in the 80s, but it doesn't do a good job. I think it does a really good job. I remember one time we were watching one of the like season 1 episodes, and they had these
Hmm.
like little yellow plates and like containers, and my dad recognized those exact containers and said it was like in her grandmother's basement and like commended them for having like old plates just as props from the 80s. Like to that extent, I think is kind of I don't know what to think of it. What do you think of it?
Of just like recognizing like, or you just mean Stranger Things and how they
I
try
mean
and
Stranger
capture?
Things like trying to represent the past. Not exactly like the story by itself,
Yeah,
but like it's a portrayal of the past of the 80s.
I feel like generally with most movies, if they do a good job of kind of like key placements of objects that, of course, like adults may recognize from their youth, it can be really, really good. But there's also times where they can completely mess up and just completely bomb it at times. But if it's well done, it is pretty good and spot on.
Yeah, isn't the term's nostalgia, right? Where we have a feeling, a positive feeling mostly, of things from our past, like from like when I was born 2003, I would maybe feel nostalgic about watching SpongeBob
Hmm.
or watching a certain show when it was airing or maybe like a certain kind of food that I ate a lot of during when I was a kid. But
Oh my.
nostalgia, I think, sometimes in products can either be used detrimentally or used effectively. And most of the time, when it's used in a positive light. It's meant
Hmm.
to get people to buy it. Like, say, there was a recent movie that was like about oh yeah, Ready Player One. I think would be a really good example. A lot of the movie is references to old 80s stuff. And of course, it's based on a book that does the exact same thing, but of course, the book didn't sell that well, I don't think. And then it was seen by Spielberg, and he was wanting to do something like that because he liked that kind of movie where, of course, it would have consumers want to go and see an old 80s reference movie so they could feel that nostalgia. But the movie itself could not be that good. They could do that, but it would still sell well because it would be on nostalgia. It would be banking on that.
Hmm.
So, one last thing, one last topic before we sign off for this podcast. Um, I think comic books, right? Comic books are probably one of the nostalgia items of people's childhoods. Maybe our parents, or maybe to us, because I think there were still comic books back in like 2000s.
Oh,
They
there's
weren't
still
that
comic
popular.
books now.
Yeah, but like back then they were like 50 cents and they were really common because they were kind of like a new medium. But
Hmm.
you know, with the new Marvel movies and Endgame, as the time of recording comes out tomorrow, and that's become one of the most popular things. Except though DC. DC has had a lot of problems in their movie industry from the very beginning. And one of the movies, I think, have you seen this? Have you seen Man of Steel before, Colin?
I have not seen Man of Steel. No,
Okay. Well, you know it's about Superman, right?
of course, yeah.
Yeah. They kind of made it so that Superman was a really kind of awful character. He was like, you know, going through a city, just demolishing everything, and the writing wasn't good for it. But I don't know what's up with DC. Like recently, they made Shazam, and that did really well because they were doing what Marvel does. They kind of had fun with the franchise. Now, of course, although Marvel has had fun in the beginning movies, of course, like Guardians of the Galaxy and definitely Volume 2, they've had a lot of fun with it. They've kind of made jokes along the way. That's kind of what keeps Marvel fresh. They keep it. They make sure it's like, okay, we're not going to take this super seriously. We're going to have a little fun with it. DC hasn't done that since like Shazam.
And I think it's because for once they decided to kind of add a new superhero, like the superhero in Shazam is wasn't in any sort of comic or anything beforehand. So there wasn't like any sort of history or sort of past that they had to follow or anything. They could just make up whatever they wanted and it would have been fine.
Yeah, I feel like that could be a problem. Like I haven't noticed any superhero movies that introduce new heroes. Shazam is an actual comic book hero that he isn't like as popular. Maybe to some comic book fans that are really hardcore about it might know about him, but I don't. I haven't really read into the lore.
Oh,
Sorry.
I actually, sorry, I didn't know there was any comic books for Shazam, so.
I think
Or
there
did
were.
they recently come?
I'm pretty sure they were, and that kind of comes to my point is that if they made a new character in specifically the movies, that could like upset the comic book com- the community for comic books, right? Because that's
Yeah,
kind of where most of the people come from. And then of course with like Marvel, it's coming in with new viewers that are just there for the movies, which fine by me because there are pretty good movies.
yeah,
Some fall a little flatter than others, in my opinion. Like Ant Man, Ant Man doesn't do that well for me, or
yeah,
Black Panther. That one did pretty well, but that was because of how they represented. They used that one race, and then people kind of uh, got on the train for that. And the movie
yeah.
by itself is fine. It's just got extra popularity because of its focus on the black race, of course.
Yeah. To be honest, though, I haven't watched Black Panther either. I know this entire podcast, I've just been saying, oh, I haven't watched this and I haven't watched that, but
Yeah, but I have you here so that we can have different alterations because there's like the outside viewer, right? That could maybe be you for some of the topics, and then I'll be the inside viewer that knows about those topics. And
yeah,
especially for retro stuff, it's like you have people that actually came from the past that know about it and experience it, and then you have people from the outside that look at that and think it's like ugly or dumb. So like if they see a person drinking like an old classic Coca-Cola, right? Like in a 1980s vintage bottle. They think that's really odd. But for the person that's drinking they think it's nostalgia. They're having very positive feelings about it. It's like, hey, I grew up in that time, and I have this memory of like having freedom or having the luxury to have that soda or just how good it tasted or like whatever memories associated with it. So
hmm,
like having an outside view especially of things that surround retro is I think kind of essential because if we can make stuff retro and bring it to the modern age and make it so that it can be appealing to people that haven't maybe known about that stuff, I think that would be a pretty cool achievement because that would be like making history lessons kind of a worldwide thing. Like, let's say for Colin, your was it your grandpa that went to or great grandpa that fought in World War I?
yes, I believe it's either my great grandpa, my great great grandpa.
Yeah, like he would show you stuff from that war, and you were interested in that because he presented that to you in a way that was impactful to you. And of course, World War I is impactful. I don't think we're gonna glance over that, but
Yeah,
I'm meaning present it to a point where it's like you can appreciate the people that have participated in it or the relics, either the photographs that were taken during that, or just the strategies they had, or just the weapons, or just anything for that age you can appreciate. And I
hmm,
think it's kind of a new art, kind of like with Vaporwave or the retro kind of refitting of new products, they're trying to make it so that stuff from the 80s or 90s comes back and people can experience that.
Yeah, I'm a very big history fan. I've been like anytime in history class, I would just be the first one in class. I would sit down and wait quietly, just waiting to see what we're going to talk about next. Either that or like I'm online finding out more and more about history, either through videos or articles or whatever.
Yeah.
So and I think it's a very very important thing to kind of preserve and appreciate history as we move forward in life and everything.
Yeah. And I think that's a good note to end on for today's podcast. You have any final thoughts?
I don't believe so.
All right. Well, this has been Retro Recluse Radio, and we'll be back with two more podcasts where our next one we'll be talking about more movies and Disney shows, and our third one we're going to be talking more about games, especially like retro ones, obviously. So stay tuned, and we'll be back for another.